spent many years of my life working in socialist campaigns and many years of my life working in green campaigns. I spent 12 years in the U.S. Green Party in the 90s chiefly. I ran for the U.S. Senate. I stood for the presidential nomination in 2000. And I always felt, and I'm not saying this in bitterness or malice or anything, but I always felt as if I was beating my head against the wall. And because my chief motivation, which I said up front from the very beginning, was that the Greens had to be socialist and the socialists had to be green, and I felt that the Green Party would be a powerful conduit of this tendency, which to me lay at the very root of our civilizational crisis. After all, the green movement is not eternal. It came about in a certain stage in history, and the stage it came about is that when the capitalist system or the dominant world system or the dominant mode of production, whatever you want to call it, began to so invade the lived space of humanity and so threaten the integrity of the global ecology that it produced then a political reaction, just as the socialist movement arose earlier because of the invasion of the dominant system in terms of the integrity of the worker, of the exploitation of labor, and the degradation of workers and their families, and all of the crises and contradictions that emerged from that. And it's apparent that the rise of the green movement signaled the further advance, if you like, the further invasion of the planet by this cancerous system of production that we can call capitalism, but have to understand in depth, because it's not just a simple economic arrangement, it's something that infects and invades all aspects of existence. And it cannot be reduced. In fact, if it is reduced to economic factors alone, then the reduction is self-defeating, because what we need to do is develop a form of society in which society enables an economy, which is but one element of society, not a society such as we live in, where the economic system sits above society and drives it, and drives us all into the doom of the ecological crisis. So these entities are converging. History has deemed it such. Why the U.S. Green Party was unable to do this is a matter we don't have to get into, but it really has to do, I think, essentially with the fact that the United States has never had a strong labor party. We've had many, many agitations within the workers' movements, but there's never been an actual labor party in the United States. I mean, there have been labor parties, but they've not been strong. They've been always marginalized. And because of that, there hasn't been a kind of consensus in society that, on the left, it has to pass through the empowerment of working people and the socialist dream, which now becomes an eco-socialist dream. And I believe also that we are in a time of great transition. It's the very fact that we're seeing the tendencies of green and red coming together in Britain is a sign not just of the hopeful combination of the British left, but also a sign, obviously, of deepening crisis. It doesn't come together except out of heightened danger. And it's a danger posed by phenomena such as global warming, phenomena such as species loss. We can go over that list, and we'll be here all day before we get to the end of the list. Everybody in this room understands that. But it's also the case that what we're seeing is the ripening of this crisis, the movement towards a new stage. And I believe, and I think we all recognize, that the recent events in Copenhagen at the end of last year, to me, signaled a sort of a turn, an opening of the door, because what we saw finally there is that the capitalist system, which rules these, COP meetings that's supposed to deal with climate, took off its mask, and there was nothing behind the mask. It revealed itself as utterly bankrupt. The entire Kyoto system of dealing with climate change was deemed fraudulent by critical socialists and eco-socialists and Greens. We knew that. My journal that I edited, Capitalism, Nature, Socialism, been writing about that for a long time. But it was never revealed as such until last December. And I think that this has signaled, at first, only in a general realization amongst people on the left, but I think increasingly it can happen throughout society that the reigning system of production, aside from being, you know, a simple distillate of greed and alienation and all the other things that we understand it to be, is also helpless and impotent to regulate the planetary consequences of its own behavior. And this is a tremendous turn of events, and we should look upon it obviously as a disaster, but a disaster that is also an awakening, at least the potential for an awakening. And I think we're all here for that. We're all here to recognize that we need to now move into a new phase, a phase in which actions, activities are not directed towards one symptom or another of the disorder, but at the fundamental cause, the cause of a global system of planetary accumulation, profiteering, and destruction. I think the word planetary is very, very important. We understand that the ecological crisis happens because the effects of capitalist production expand beyond the workplace, beyond the home. They're picked up by great currents in the air and the water. I was always shocked to learn that the highest concentrations of dioxin, for instance, in the bloodstream of any animal occurs in polar bears, okay, which just shows you how absolutely planetary the problem is and has become. How, you know, we can go on and on about this, how each of us in this room has in our bloodstreams hundreds of pollutants that have been reabsorbed through the great currents that, in which our lives exist. But by the same token, the necessity is for an international movement, a movement now that takes place in great cities like this, great countries like this, but also focuses on the whole world. A few years ago, some colleagues and I initiated something called the Ecosocialist International Network. You can look it up on the ecosocialism.org. I think you want to pay attention to it. We met in Paris in 2007. We met in Belém in Brazil in 2009. It was very good because it was the first meeting was the North, the second meeting was the South. We had fourth world people there who were moving to the forefront of this. We want to build on that. We don't want the Eco-Socialist International Network to simply be another political party. It's not that. We want it to be a great forum within which all of the spontaneously arising radical moves against the current system of destruction can meet each other, can communicate with each other, and can build what we really need, which is a planetary response to a planetary disaster. I'll stop at this point, and I turn it over to my colleague, and really look forward to working with you throughout the day. To me, this is an opportunity to learn. There are many things you're doing here in England. I mean, you're all, one thing about a leftist is you always say, oh, things are going terribly, we're fragmented, we're getting beaten up. And so, but from my perspective, the grass is a lot greener over here. And, I've heard of all kinds of interesting stuff that I'm really looking forward to learning from as the day goes on. Thank you.